Hello guys, DJParson here, back for the next tier list, and we've reached H2, and I gotta say it's getting harder and harder to weight these leaders, because you guys know everything in through the ages depends a lot on the situation. I'm still gonna give my best and try to weight them accordingly to how I think they should be valued, but that doesn't mean that when I give a low weighting that you can't use them. They have their moments, every leader has their moments. But with that said, let's first get into the old ratings that I did and take a look again what I said there. So we start again with the mining and farming technologies. Coal and selective breeding 8 and 9. I think that holds mostly true. I think the big part is that these are 2-player ratings and there's only one coal and one selective breeding. So if you've missed out on either the iron or the selective or the irrigation, then you really should try to get one of these. Coal you can maybe skip, but you definitely need food to get some population out. Maybe if you get Ocean Liner Service or Statue of Liberty, maybe some colonies, you can get away with not getting so much food. But overall, these are still really important and can get grabbed away easily by your opponent if he denies you that. Looking at the urban building tax, I don't know why I rated scientific method that low. I don't think it's a 6. I definitely agree on the organized religion. I basically never use that. But scientific method definitely should be a lot higher, I think. Probably an 8 or even a 9. You guys know nowadays I try to skip alchemy and go immediately for scientific method. That works nicely with a lot of H3 leaders still, the scientific method. And then you can still get Bill Gates and the other leaders, so scientific method can give you that much needed science boost. So I definitely would rate scientific method a little bit higher. Journalism and opera is still very luxury tags, and it's really hard to get these. Maybe I would rate opera a little bit higher with the upgraded Bach. That definitely is a good combo, also with Marlene. So theaters in general get a little bit stronger, so probably I would rate that a little bit higher. And then team sports, probably the weakest of all the arena tags. When circuses are very cheap and you need them early, the happy faces, so that's a good time to get into that. And then professional sports from H3 is better than team sports, so that is basically the odd one out. But if you still need happy faces, that's a great tag that you can just take. It's really cheap, and of course you guys know that if Pierre's in there, the team sports enables you to go for him. But yeah, probably not higher than a 6. Navigation also seems fine at a 6. It's really situational if you do have some colonies in the event stack or not. And strategy definitely still a 10. You can sometimes get away with not scraping that out, but overall it's such an important technology that can, especially in 2-player games, decide who's the aggressor, who can defend and whatnot. So definitely one of the best tags to get with your science, so definitely a 10. And justice system also really good, especially if you have a lot of science production. You always, if you have a high science production, you search for good technologies that you can research. If you have low science production, then you more look at what tags you really need. So that's a way to look at that. You often don't need justice system, maybe if you're still at despotism or something. But if you have the science, that is a really good tag to grab. And then architecture, similarly, I would definitely rate that higher now. Architecture, the saving steps on the wonder builds is really important for a lot of the very good wonders. You're gonna get to that in the tier list. A lot of the good wonders have quite a lot of steps, so architecture definitely helps with that. And then also for H3 wonders, quite a lot of them have a lot of steps, like the International Red Cross. And that is really hard to finish, especially because the others can steal your points if you don't build all the steps at once. And that's where architecture really shines, so I would probably give that an 8 now. Yep, probably an 8. So coming to the military technologies, not sure about riflemen. I mean, there's only one rifleman in the game, in 2-player games that is, so I think that probably is a little bit more important. Cavalrymen and cannons. Cannons definitely super important. There are 2, so you should be able to get one. But you still have to have your eye out for that. You can never, or I say never, but there can be, of course, situations where you can skip cannons. If you draw early medieval army, or not the classic army rather, then you maybe don't need cannons. But overall, you really want to track those when they come out, where they will be. You never want to be in the position where you don't get them if you really need them. And then overall the tactics with cannons and cavalrymen are stronger than the ones with the riflemen, so that was probably my thinking. So it seems about right. Cannons are really important. Not so sure about the constitutional monarchy, why I only gave it a 7. I think when I was doing these ratings, I was a big fan of H1 governments. And that is really decision of play style and what you like. But nowadays, I definitely see a lot of value in going for H2 governments. And then Conmon definitely is a lot better than Republic. Probably a 9. That can also be one of those very, very crucial techs that get denied often. And if cards get denied from your opponent, that often means they are very, very valuable. And you see that quite often with the constitutional monarchy. So definitely would rate that a little bit higher. Republic's still not super great, maybe even a 6. Depending greatly on your military actions that you have. You can get stuck with Republic and then lose to the game because you don't have military actions to defend or to go for those wars that you really, really need. So yeah, definitely constitutional monarchy overall better than Republic. If you have strategy, then you also enable Republic for you. That is a great combo that you still can go for. So yeah, those were all the technologies. I think, yeah, the yellow cards probably not really change a lot. Breakthrough, 3 signs for 1 civil action, basically. That is still very, very strong. Revolutionary idea as well. Science is so important, especially if you skipped alchemy, still at 2 or 3 science production. Then revolutionary idea and breakthroughs can really carry you and give you some extra science. We have nationalism, probably higher, I would say, maybe even a 10. That can be such an important card to hold in your hand, like even for H3. If your opponent has wave of nationalism, maybe you can't go for those wars, you can defend, you can use that to play aggressively. That is always something nice to have in your hand to make it hard for the other to decide if he can go for wars, if you can go for wars. So that's a really nice card to have in your hand. And then, I don't know, efficient upgrade growth could be a little bit lower. But yeah, that really, really depends. So looking at the leaders and wonders, we're of course going to do a tier list for them. But let's first take a look how I rated them last time. Napoleon and Catherine on top. That's quite interesting. But yeah, we're going to see how they will be rated. And then also the wonders and yeah, Louvre with the highest score. Let's see how that changes with the new ratings. So let's hop into the H2. Nope. H2 tier list. Sorry, misclick there. So starting in D tier, you're gonna start with one leader that can be helpful in some situations. Antonio Gaudi, I'm talking about. If you reasonably think about him as giving you 3 culture production, like you easily have 1 religion and some laboratories, and then you can use them to go for 1 more tech, like operas or journalism, maybe team sports. Then he can give you a science discount and like 3 culture production. Sometimes you get more from him, like if you go for even more urban buildings, different urban buildings, and they can produce more culture and give you bigger discounts. But usually you don't want to spread out into a lot of different urban buildings. That always takes 1 step to take and to research all of these different urban building technologies. So he's really, really hard to use and he doesn't get played a lot. A little bit similar is Shakespeare. I know a lot of you guys really, really like Shakespeare, and he can be really, really awesome. If you get, especially if you get like an early drama and build 1 or 2 drama instead of the religion, that can give you the happy faces that you need. And then you can get into journalism with Shakespeare and produce an insane amount of culture. That is really, really fun to play like that. And especially against, in the challenges, for example, that is really one of my favorite playstyles to play. Not go for those big wars, but for insane culture production, and then Shakespeare really shines. Especially in 1 vs 1s though, that is just too greedy. If you go for drama, that is already greedy. You already sacrifice some science, some resources to go for drama instead of religions or other ways to get happy faces. And then even going for journalism after that is in 2-player games, most of the times it's too greedy. Sometimes you get stuck in a culture war, or in the culture race where no one really goes for wars and no one goes for military, then you can shine. But usually it's very, very dangerous. Another leader that is in D tier is Maria Teresa. The science and culture sound great that you can get, but even if you have ocean liner service, you get that once per turn, and that is basically the maximum you can reasonably think about what she can give you, because you maybe can save some food and then increase population a lot with Maria Teresa once, and then you get a nice culture and science boost, but it's really not that much science and culture really. At maximum she gives you like 4 or 5 culture or 1 culture turn, so that's not the greatest production. And then the resources can be great if you're behind, to catch up a little bit. If you don't have low sign or low resource production, then she can definitely be good, but overall she doesn't have the most cases where she really shines. And then if she works for you, she's never overwhelming, I feel. So that is D tier. Let's come up to C tier, and these leaders in C tier are what I would say are very, very situational leaders, but when they work amazingly. Like James Cook, of course you need to have a lot of information what is in the event stack. Did you plant a lot of colonies? Then he can win you those colonies, give you a lot of culture production. One of the problems is he only gives culture production, and I mean a little bit for the winning the colonies, but his main goal is to get that culture going. And you can do that in H2, definitely. But often you want something else, something a little bit extra that a lot of the other leaders can give you. They can give you culture production and just a little bit more than just colonization force. But if you have a lot of colonies, especially with the Zeus Cannon, that is a tactic or a strategy that can work amazingly. Another leader on C tier that can work amazingly is James Watt. I really struggled with him, where to put him. But yeah, in the end I decided for C tier. He could definitely be higher, depending on where you are. If you have coal, then he's great. Maybe you can get a late oil with him, but the problem is you need to have that already in your hand or pick them up at the same point, because you can't hope for that with James Watt. You can't get an H2 leader that you maybe never get to use. So he needs a lot of things to work out to be really good. If you have iron already, you can't really go for Watt. The upgrade from iron to coal is not big enough. Best position, of course, is if you have still normal farms and bronze mines, and then get selective breeding and the coal. But yeah, that doesn't happen all the time, but that is the best case. And in the worst case, he doesn't really give you a lot. So yeah, it's very situational, but with a huge potential, I would say. Another one, really, really depending on your situation, is Robespierre. He can really, really save your game if you have low science production and still a despotism, and maybe you have a few military actions, then you can get that republic going for 2 science, just losing a few military actions, a few military cards that you can't draw. But without him, without Maximilian Robespierre, you would be stuck on despotism, so then that can really, really save you. But often the bonus isn't big enough. You still want to draw cards, want to draw military cards. So some newer players think he doesn't really have the downside, but that can be quite crucial, especially if you go for H3 governments. That is also something that he can go for. Do 2 revolutions, even gets a little bit of culture for that. But then you don't draw H3 cards, or in H2 you don't really draw H2 cards. So if you're digging for those very important tactics, then Robespierre makes it so you don't draw any cards. So that has downsides, but it also has a lot of potential if you're searching for a government form and don't have the science to get that in another way. So coming up to B tier, some leader that I underestimated when the expansion came out, but nowadays I like him really a lot. I even decided, I had thought with putting him even a little bit higher. I'm talking about Charles Darwin here. Realistically, he's gonna give you 3 culture production most of the time. That is quite solid for an H2 leader. If you have 3 labs, that's something I like to do. Have 3 philosophy labs going. His downside with the not getting happiness phases from the religions, or 1 less. Yeah, you need to calculate that. If you have religion, then you maybe can't go for them, but usually I try to get my happy phases from wonders or arenas. stuff like that. And then he doesn't really have a downside after that. And then he gives you civil actions for taking extra technologies that can be really, really crucial. Makes you able to take more cards away from your opponent. That usually is quite costly if you have grab away those technologies that your opponent really wants, but you can't even really go for realistically. For example, if you have warfare and strategy comes up and you would like to deny that from your opponent, you have to grab that for 3. But with Charles Darwin, you just have to pay 2, and that makes those decisions a lot easier. So I like him really for those cases, and then just grabbing technologies cheaper. So if you're low in civil actions, he's great for that. Another leader that is great if you have low civil actions is Newton. Isaac Newton, giving you extra civil actions for developing stuff. So they are a little bit similar. Darwin gives culture production, Newton gives science production. But both give civil actions, one for developing, one for taking tax. Newton is very solid if you have scientific method. With alchemy, he doesn't really work as nicely, so yeah, if you get up to the scientific method, then he's really, really great, gives a lot of science production. Overall, I think I like Darwin a little bit more, because if you have scientific method already, then you already get a lot of science, and then Newton's 2 extra isn't as impactful, like from, let's say, Nobel or something. So you need high science production anyway to get the big bonus from Newton. But still, he's a great leader, gives civil actions, you can do a lot of nice things in one turn with him. So really, really like that aspect of him. Coming up to A tier, I was really struggling with all of these ratings, guys. Keep in mind, these are my opinion, and they could change at any point. But next are the military leaders, and I would call them. First, Napoleon. Before the expansion, definitely S tier or even higher. He used to be the best card in the game. Nowadays, I mean, his nerf wasn't that big, just 1 military action, you might think, but it really shows in the game. Also got a lot more great competition, a lot of great other leaders that can compete with him. He's still really good. He can help you if you are the weakest. You grab him, get that 4, maybe even 6 extra strength, some military actions to defend yourself. And so that is his big strength, that is useful for the stronger and for the weaker player. So if you're already dominating your opponent, denying them Napoleon and maybe getting off another aggression on him, that can be really where Napoleon shines. Similar with the military action is Catherine. Catherine also gives you 1 military action and the 2 culture production. Catherine is great if you're ahead already. If you're in a military arms race, for example, and you get stronger every turn, and he does in his turn, you're producing 2 culture while your opponent is not producing anything. And then they can't just sit back and let you be stronger for 1 turn, because then you steal 1 yellow cube, and that is really a great ability of hers. Stealing that 1 yellow cube, especially important in 1 vs 1. That is like a free border conflict. So that is really, really strong ability of hers that you can hope to use. And as I said, if both players are going for a lot of military, you're gonna get some military with Catherine. Not as much as Napoleon, of course. Catherine just gives the military action. But starting that culture production can be quite impactful in the end. If you have her for like 6-7 turns, that will stack up quite fast to 20 culture, something that your opponent has to catch up then. So that is a great way to start your culture production while still being quite threatening. So another leader that doesn't go for military at all, but is still really, really strong, is Johann Sebastian Bach, with a big buff from the expansion, the extra 2 culture and everything. He's really surprisingly good in my opinion. I wouldn't think that you could pull him off that often, but he's just such a culture beast that you can start that early, and often he can save you a lot of resources because you don't have to go for expensive wonders or anything to produce culture. I like him especially with dramas. Dramas are really, really good with Bach. You get them quite cheaply, and then each of them produces 1 extra. So with 2 dramas, you have a very, very strong culture production that the opponent has to either improve himself to get more culture production himself, or he has to go for wars, and if you force him to go for wars, then you can prepare for that. So that is really great if you can use Bach without spending too much on him. And coming up to S tier, my favorite leader from H2 is Nobel. Nobel is really so good in so many positions. I like to play with very low science production in H1. Like, just keep your labs, maybe 2 or 3 science production, and then the 2 extra from Nobel is such a huge deal. That is, sometimes it doubles your science production out of nothing. Like, yeah, Newton can also produce 2 science, but as we said, then you already have a lot of science. So relatively to what you have or what you're producing already, Nobel gives such a nice boost with 2 science. And then 2 strength as well. That is especially important in 2-player games, as you guys know. 2 strength can be signing if you get the aggression off from your opponent, or if you're able to defend. His Nobel Prize is also really interesting. Not getting back the civil action is a little bit hurtful to him, that you don't get back the civil action when you replace him. But that happens in H3 at some point. Usually then you have a lot of civil actions, so it can be bad for this one turn where you would really like to get that civil action back. But he's still such a big boost in H2 that you can be okay with that. And you can plan around that, save up a little bit of that science that he's producing, maybe go for computers early then, if you skipped out on every other technology producing tech. Like, if you skipped alchemy and scientific method, then go for early computers, still produce a lot of science, and then win that Nobel Prize 2 or 3 times. Then that's even a lot of culture that he can give you. So these are my favorite leaders and my tier list for the leaders in 2-player games. If you would change it around for 3 and 4-player games, I think Bach might even go up to S tier. Culture production is a big deal in 4-player games especially, so I would rate him higher then. Maybe Watt would be a little bit higher. You have bigger chances to grab those iron. No, not the iron, the coal and the selected breeding. Grabbing those is a lot easier because there are more copies of them. So then he has a bigger chance of getting those. Also, production is more important in 4-player games, so Watt generally should be a little bit better. I would really like to put Shakespeare one higher, but I sadly still can't really do that, because his bonus is still hard to use in more player games. So I don't know, maybe you could change these military leaders, Napoleon and Catherine, and then Darwin and Newton. But that, as I said, depends really on your game, what you go for, how you play, what your play style is and everything. So these could be ratings for 4-player games. But yeah, let me know in the comments what you think would change in 3 and 4-player games, what your ratings are. But now let's get back to the 2 players and go to the wonders. So starting in D tier for the wonders from H2. One wonder that I rated pretty low as well in the last rating. It is the Harvard College. It's not a bad wonder. If you need science, that can really save you. If you have a lot of resource production, if you have had early coal, maybe you have 3 iron going, something like that. So we really have nice production of resources, but not a lot of science production. Then Harvard College is exactly what you want. That is usually the thing, right? If you have a lot of resources, you want a wonder that you can spend that on and don't have to spend science on upgrading, whatever. So Harvard College, great if you need science, and maybe you don't have that scientific method. Maybe you don't have the science to go for the scientific method at the moment. You need other techs that are more important. But you have enough civil actions and resources to go for the college, then that really shines. But as I said, I personally like to go for scientific methods more. That also gives science, and then going for both is basically overkill. But scientific methods have the great aspect that they work for a lot of H3 leaders. A lot of the H3 leaders need computers or scientific methods. So if you skip out on scientific method, then maybe you don't get the computers. Computers can come very late. Maybe then they are too expensive. So Harvard College, great if you have a lot of resources, no science. But I prefer to go for scientific methods. Coming up to C tier is a wonder that can sometimes feel hard to use. the Kremlin. The negative happy face or the frowny face can be a big hindrance. If you have some Peter's Basilica, maybe team sports, then maybe sometimes it doesn't matter at all. If you really need military actions, that can be great. 2 culture production is okay, but that's also really expensive. 12 resources for the Kremlin. The civil and military actions can be really great, especially if they get that early. But overall, a little bit too expensive for what it gives you. Can cause you happy face problems. It's not the most culture production, so you can't rely on that. It's not like an Eiffel Tower. So overall, just lagging a little bit. Doesn't have the most situations where I would say I definitely want the Kremlin. Again, if you have a lot of resources and no happy face problems, so then Kremlin is really great. In B tier, I put the culture producing wonders, so to speak. First off, the Louvre, my favorite wonder in the last rating. But as it turns out, losing 3 yellow cubes that you have to lay on the Louvre can give you a lot of corruption, and that has like a hidden cost of the Louvre is that you can have corruption more often. So I'm not a big fan of that. It still can give you an insane amount of culture production. That is the big bonus. The thing it has over stuff like the Eiffel Tower, for example, is that you get those resources in the bank, and that is so important for wars. For H3, as I said before, H3 is often about calculating what you have to defend and what you can pull off in one turn. And then having potential military is just important as having real military. Like having that, as we said, the wave of nationalism in your hand, and having the Louvre, then everybody or if your opponent decides or thinks about declaring the war on you, and he sees you have 6 extra resources every turn that you could use, that makes wars really hard. So that's the great aspect of the Louvre. So the Louvre is not only a culture wonder, but for me it's often also a military wonder. So that is the great aspect of that. As I said before, the drawback is corruption, and that's the aspect that hinders me the most. If you get it with civil service, then that's still really great. Maybe with Roman roads or some wealthy territory, then it's still a really good wonder if you have resources and need to start producing culture and still want to be able to defend that culture in H3. So overall, it's still a great wonder. Yeah, we talked about that before. The Eiffel Tower is a little bit similar to the Louvre in giving a lot of culture production, and that happy face instead of the potential resources. If you need happy faces, that can be great. Often you have like 1 or 2 happy faces in H2, and then you need just another one to last you a little bit longer, and then you can plan after that. But yeah, Eiffel Tower, just the wonder to go for if you have resources and want some culture production, especially if you have a lot of resources that you can't spend on anything else, but you're not struggling with science or anything, you just want culture production. And there are those games where you just want culture production. Maybe you are strong already, maybe you feel like you have a good spot, but your opponent is running away with the culture, then the Eiffel Tower can really help you catch up. So then that's really great. Another wonder that's a little bit like that, and that I'm also going to put here, is the Statue of Liberty. These all feel a little bit similar and they produce a lot of culture. Statue of Liberty does have that problem of needing the government together with that, so that is one big drawback, that you can't obviously not stay at despotism and go for Statue of Liberty. With H1 government forms like monarchy, then you get 1 culture production from the statue, so that is not really worth it. Then you have to plan around getting an H3 government. Like getting democracy with the Statue of Liberty is going to be 6 culture production just from that. So that is really great. But you have to plan around that. What government form are you at? And then of course the big bonus, the 3 yellow cubes. As we said before, if you're still at the normal agricultures, then you need some form of either food production, but if you get denied the selective breeding, or you need yellow cubes. So Statue of Liberty can be great in giving you more space to increase population and all of that. So yeah, these three wonders give you culture production, and they each have their own little gimmick, like potential resources, that happy face, and then the yellow cubes. So all of these pretty solid if you need culture. Statue of Liberty, you have to look at that carefully, but yeah, those are all pretty strong wonders for culture. So coming up to A tier, one wonder that is surprisingly consistent, I would say, is the Zeus Cannon. Obviously, you do need a territory in hand to make that work, but you draw quite a lot of territories, and you can keep those. There are a lot of territories that really work with that. The best one is, in my opinion, the autonomous territory, but there are other really great territories from H2, that is the vast territory, the inhabited territory, and then you can even make the wealthy territory work really nicely. Finishing the Zeus Cannon, immediately getting a lot of the resources back that you just spent, and then producing more because of the Zeus Cannon is really, really great. One problem is you need more than one colony with the Zeus Cannon in most cases, like grabbing that just to go for that one colony. So you have to plan around that a little bit. Maybe if you look at what leaders and wonders are in the game, see the Zeus Cannon, maybe plan around that a little bit. Maybe you can get Columbus, maybe you can get cartography and plant some of those territories, try to win them, and then enable Zeus Cannon for you. But if you enable it, it can be really strong. Solves your resource production. Maybe you're still at 3 bronze, then you don't need to go for the iron, or don't need to go for the coal, and still have really nice resource production that can save you in a lot of steps, or in a lot of stops. Another wonder that is really, really great is the Transcontinental Railroad. I've always been a big fan of that. And they even gave that one more strength in the expansion, so yeah, I'll take that definitely. Strength, especially now that we're talking about 2 players, yeah, the strength is really, really big boost. 5 strength is quite a lot. That can make you from being the weakest to the strongest easily. And then resource production. If you have iron, that's perfectly fine. You don't want to get the railroad with bronze, but with iron, that's okay. That's okay. With coal, that's really, really, really strong. And if you get coal, if you got oil, then that's really, really insane. So you'll have a lot of resource production with that wonder, and the strength really, really helpful in so many positions. That this is just a solid wonder. I mean, the Zeus Cannon and Railroad need some setup, but it's not too hard to have good setup with them. That's often a problem with some cards, that they need elaborate positions to really work. And the Zeus Cannon maybe a little bit more leaning to that it needs other colonies in play for you already, and you need to have one in your hand. But it really makes it worth it. And really, the Railroad with the extra resource production and strength, that's mostly what you want in H2 still. Depending on the game state, of course. Sometimes, as we said before, you want the culture production, but I feel more often you need strength and resources still. And in S tier, my favorite wonder from H2 is the Ocean Liner Service. I think the buff that they gave that in the expansion is really, really impactful. 2 less resource production, that extra yellow, or 2 less resource cost, and that extra yellow cube can be quite important. Especially you're gonna have a lot of population, and so yellow cubes in the bank really important with the Ocean Liner Service. Saving your food consumption and all of that. And especially if you get that early, that can be such a game changer. That's always one of the wonders I look at first. If I take a look at the leaders and wonders, is Ocean Liner Service in the game. That changes the game quite a lot. Changes a lot of the other evaluations that you have to do constantly. Like irrigation becomes a lot less important. Like if there's no Ocean Liner Service and you don't get irrigation, and selective breeding gets denied, you're gonna have some problems. But if there's still Ocean Liner Service, you can always try to rely on that. And if it's very, very late, of course, then the Ocean Liner Service is not that great anymore. That's one weakness. You want to get that early. Another weakness is the 4 steps. That's something that Zeus Cannon and the Railroad have as well. That's what I said when we talked about the architecture. That's what makes architecture really, really strong. then you can get these steps for a lot cheaper, not so many civil actions, so that's really great. And quite, yeah, something that I notice is that all of these 3 top wonders give you production, so that's one way to look at it. Oceanliner gives you more population, sewers and the railroad give you resource production. So that it seems like that's what I value most in H2 still. You need to find the way to switch into culture production at some point. But the way I play, usually I don't feel that time is yet when I want an H2 wonder. And then in the end of H2, I often don't want to take one of the culture producing wonders because then it's often too late and you want to be open for the H3 wonders. Those can be just one big boost of culture, and you don't want to have the Eiffel Tower lying around during the middle of H3 and not finished yet. Even if you finish that, then you're gonna get 3-4 production phases with the Eiffel Tower. That can be okay, but also often it feels just too late that you can't finish those. And yeah, it seems like I really prefer the production besides the Harvard College, because I like my science production from the scientific method. So yeah, that's my takeaway from this. Let me know in the comments what you think. You can also, again, do your own tier list. I'm going to link that in the description. But yeah, thanks again for joining me for today. I hope you had a lot of fun, had some nice thoughts that we could share, and let me know in the comments what you think, what your leaders and wonders are for this pick. And yeah, I hope I see you for the next video. That is going to be H3 next week.